The man hiked alone through the forest, carefully following the narrow trail between the trees. The air was still, filled only with the buzz of insects and the soft whisper of leaves. The scent of moss and pine drifted over the gentle breeze, mixing with the warmth of the afternoon sun. He approached a small clearing and paused to rest. He lifted his head toward the sky. High above the treetops, clouds drifted in slow formation, bright and weightless against the blue sky. Suddenly, an unusual sight caught his eye. Something large and luminous was moving among the clouds. The strange object shimmered with translucent hues tinged with silver light. Beneath its glistening body hung trailing filaments, similar to undulating ribbons or tentacles. The man continued to stare at the mysterious object high in the sky. Could it be a reflection, or a rare atmospheric event, or perhaps a UFO? It looked like a huge jellyfish, adrift in the sky, translucent with organic movements, almost as if the strange object was a living creature. Suddenly a hawk gave out a cry as it rose up from the branches. It circled above the tree tops and disappeared from view. Momentarily distracted, the man returned his gaze to the clouds, but the creature could no longer be seen. The object had faded as though absorbed into the clouds, leaving no trace behind it. The man paused for a while. Around him the familiar sounds of the forest slowly returned. He could hear the voices of distant hikers. He turned and made his way back down the trail. But he knew he would say nothing of what he had just seen. After all, who would believe that high among the clouds strange creatures can be seen to dwell? No one would believe him. So he continued to remain silent, and never spoke of the strange sky creature he had witnessed that day. Astonishing as it may seem, people from around the world have reported sightings of strange creatures living high among the clouds. Seemingly, these bizarre creatures find the upper atmosphere a comfortable environment in which to live and thrive. And just as in our story, such creatures are occasionally witnessed by puzzled members of the public. But what exactly are these strange creatures high up in the atmosphere? Today, in Mysteries from a Forgotten World, we explore the strange phenomenon of sky critters. A sky critter can be defined as an unknown organism or aerial creature, often sighted high up in the Earth's atmosphere. These creatures are often described as behaving more like living entities than machine-like objects. They are not structured aircraft or flying saucers, and are often categorized as cryptids of unknown origin. Today, however, the term still remains controversial with no clear agreement as to what a sky critter could actually be. Are they real, or just a figment of our imaginations? For as long as humans have gazed upwards, people have wondered what might live high up among the clouds. The idea that the sky itself could be home to living creatures can be found in centuries of myth, folklore, and speculation. Here we are not talking about ancient sky gods or legendary heroes who occupy a place among the stars, but rather unique creatures that appear ethereal, yet possess just enough substance to seem real and undeniable to the senses. Stories and reports from ancient China and Japan speak of luminous sky creatures resembling dragons and celestial fish, which live high up in the clouds. Even in the Western world, there are reports of mysterious sky objects reaching back to ancient times. For example, phantom ships described as shining in the sky were recorded by Livy, the Roman historian. Later, the Roman author, Pliny the Elder, wrote of fiery globes and flaming shields that drifted and moved against the wind. As time passed, the ancient world moved into the Dark Ages, where unusual sky sightings continue to be recorded. Chinese and Japanese sky creatures continued to be observed throughout this period, with various imperial reports of fiery serpents and dragons in the sky. Often these sightings were interpreted as portents and omens affecting royal dynasties and imperial rule in both China and Japan. In the Middle East, Arab astronomers recorded many occurrences of unusual atmospheric effects in this period. Comet-like objects seen falling from the sky were interpreted as bad omens by many people at the time. Throughout Western Europe, sightings continued into the Middle Ages. In more northerly parts of Scandinavia, reports of fiery streaks were described as fireworms, and dragons were recorded in parts of Norway and Sweden. It is undoubted that many atmospheric sightings from this period most likely have a natural explanation, but not all reports can be easily explained. A report from the Irish Annals, around AD 749, tells of a skyship high up in the air. Astonishingly, the ship contained a complement of sky crew. The report continued with the crew attempting to lower an anchor from the air. However, the anchor got caught on a church steeple, instead of catching on the ground itself. By the end of the Middle Ages, sightings of unusual events in the sky became even more inexplicable. In 1561, at Nuremberg in Germany, multiple witnesses reported hundreds of sphere-like objects moving around the sun. Some of these aerial objects also included cylinder-like shapes and rod-like structures. These peculiar objects were seen to fight each other and move randomly around the sky. Again, only a few years later in 1566 at Basel in Switzerland, multiple witnesses reported unusual atmospheric effects. It was stated that large black spheres were seen moving around the sky, and above the horizon, the sun appeared blood-red and fiery. It's hard to explain what precisely people were witnessing during this period of time. Could people be sighting the activities of mysterious sky people who sail among the clouds in aerial ships of unknown design? Are such reports early examples of UFOs and flying saucers, or is there something else at work here? As we approach the modern era, a new scientific way of thinking began to develop. Although magic and alchemy continued to influence the burgeoning scientific approach, new instruments enable closer scrutiny of nature itself. Natural philosophers proposed the existence of basic elements in order to describe the fundamental constituents of nature. This was not a new idea, but the elements were to be established through experimentation and careful scientific observation rather than conjecture or guesswork. The 16th century alchemist, Paracelsus, assigned supernatural entities to each of the natural elements. For the element of air, the sylphs were given dominion. These air creatures existed on the margins of human perception and inhabited the atmosphere high up among the wind and clouds. However, the influence of supernatural belief finally began to wane as science became more sophisticated in its methods and practice. Scientific theories no longer relied on old mystical ideas as the new age of reason began to take hold. The idea of sky people, or luminous dragons living among the clouds, now seemed curious, but thoroughly unscientific, with such notions belonging to a more superstitious period in history. However, with the advent of hot air ballooning in 1784, until the arrival of powered flight in 1903 by the Wright brothers, people continued to sight mysterious objects high in the sky. Even in the modern industrial era, sightings of sky serpents continued to be recorded. During the 1870s and 1890s, various British and American newspapers reported unusual stories of strange atmospheric creatures alive in the clouds. Stories of sky serpents, or air monsters, continued to be reported. Sightings of living clouds and luminous jellyfish creatures were not at all uncommon in the 19th century press. Analysis shows a number of common factors present in these reports. Sky creatures often seem to pulsate or breathe. They appear round or bell-shaped with trailing filaments. They tend to move silently and slowly against the clouds. And in at least one case, a strange heat and odor was reported. Often sky creatures are described as self-luminous, but not identified as either astronomical or atmospheric events. The propensity of sightings of these anomalous creatures continued into the early 20th century. At this time, The weight of reports was such that they could not be easily ignored by a certain author called Charles Fort. In his work, The Book of the Damned, published in 1919, Fort detailed many accounts of strange atmospheric occurrences. Through his writing, Fort was able to popularize the idea that the heavens could support an environment in which various mysterious life forms could live and thrive. High among the clouds, Fort envisioned the existence of semigelatinous life forms, which occasionally shed organic debris that eventually would float to the ground. Even so, the idea of life forms living at altitude and inhabiting the upper regions of the atmosphere gradually gained respectability in the mid-1970s. The cosmologist Carl Sagan and his colleague, Edwin Salpeter, proposed that it was theoretically possible that such sky creatures could exist in the atmospheres of exoplanets elsewhere in the galaxy. In their 1976 study, Sagan and Salpeter outlined a speculative framework that explored the scientific possibility of atmospheric life. Charles Fort's idea of semigelatinous sky creatures now seemed credible and worthy of scientific investigation. Sagan and Salpeter envisioned an atmospheric ecosystem occupied by immense gas-filled organisms that would float high among the clouds of an alien world, where smaller creatures, though aerodynamically evolved, would swoop down through the atmosphere and prey upon the huge gas blimps as they floated high among the clouds. Moreover, Sagan and Salpeter further speculated that such sky creatures could conceivably live in atmospheres similar to those of Venus and Jupiter in our own solar system. It is research of this type that ultimately laid the groundwork for the basic formation of the sky critter concept, which would eventually begin to appear in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Nonetheless, with the arrival of the new millennium, sightings of sky critters continued well into the 21st century. Countries as far as China and North America, and from India to Europe, sightings of strange aerial creatures continued to be made. Remarkably, sightings of sky dragons are still being reported in China. But elsewhere around the world, people continue to witness a variety of sky critter appearances. Huge sky monsters with trailing tentacles from beneath their bodies have also been witnessed, while other sightings include jellyfish creatures with long trailing filaments flowing behind them. As we approach the 2020s, various winged creatures have been reported from around the world. In addition, sightings of sky angels and sky fairies have increased over time. Incredibly, people have also reported sightings of pterodactyl-like creatures that seem to swoop down from high in the air. However, there is one thing we can be certain about is that reports of mysterious sky critters are likely to continue into the future. So far, we have seen over a long period of time that people of various historical epochs have borne witness to a variety of aerial creatures seen high up in the atmosphere. Consequently, it would seem reasonable to ask, what type of creatures are we dealing with? And what do sky critters have in common? To begin with, sky critters are generally seen to inhabit the upper regions of the atmosphere and are seen to move among the clouds. The behavior of sky creatures are often described as lifelike, as though they were living organisms. They can appear like gas bags or gas blimps that slowly float through the atmosphere. Some of these creatures look similar to gelatinous jellyfish, again moving slowly through the sky. Critters of this type can be gigantic in size when seen high up against the clouds. They are often described as luminous and pulsating as if alive. Much smaller, but more aerodynamic creatures have also been witnessed. It is speculated that such critters may be a predator species with speed and maneuverability, and may possibly be reported as UFOs or flying saucers. In addition, sky critters can appear as winged creatures that variously take the form of angel-like beings, or even sky fairies who flit from one cloud to another. Other types of sky creature can take the form of dragons or fish, and even appear as prehistoric animals like the pterodactyl. What is clear is that we are dealing with a very unusual set of circumstances. Can it really be possible that such creatures could make their home high up in the atmosphere? If sky critters do in fact exist, it would certainly add another layer of complexity here, on the rich tapestry of life on Earth. As we draw to a close, it may be worth speculating on the nature of the sky critter phenomenon. Historical reports have described many examples of flaming shields and luminous wheels moving through the sky. Mysterious orbs and rods have also been recorded circling around the sun. In addition, great skyships and sky galleons have been witnessed sailing through the clouds, and aboard these vessels, a full crew have been reported. Historical observations of this type fit more with reports of UFOs and flying saucers, rather than living creatures inhabiting the upper atmosphere. The crew of skyships could be misidentified alien pilots who occupy these putative aerial vehicles. Nonetheless, it would seem that at least some sky critter observations may be better reported as alien visitations or extraterrestrial incursions into our skies. Even so, many sightings of sky critters are often described against a backdrop of mythological belief. Luminous sky dragons, celestial fish, and legendary sky worms have been sighted and reported throughout history. Even cases of air creatures, such as sylphs as described by Paracelsus, have been sighted along with sky angels and sky fairies. It is difficult to explain how these sightings readily take the form of mythological sky creatures. One explanation could be the psychological need to find wonder in an otherwise dull and tedious world, seemingly bereft of spirit and imagination. However, many observations of sky creatures may correspond with basic and deep-seated psychological archetypes. It is possible this could lead to an unconscious bias toward mythological explanations, where unusual atmospheric sightings cannot be easily identified and fitted into ordinary experience. But on the other hand, it could be that sky critters are indeed actual sightings of a very rare and unusual type of life, not yet known to conventional science. There is an entire catalogue of cryptid species reported throughout the world. Why shouldn't it be possible that some form of anomalous sky creature does indeed make its home high up among the clouds? This is no more controversial than assuming Bigfoot lives in the nearby woods. If we discount astronomical events such as comets and fireballs, and at the same time, exclude all atmospheric sightings of unusual cloud formations, lightning, and other similar weather events, we may just come closer to the truth. Sightings of large gas-filled organisms and jellyfish-like creatures, which seem to float across the sky, may not seem so fantastic after all. If Carl Sagan and Edwin Salpeter can envisage the existence of alien gas-filled creatures as far back as the 1970s, then it is not unreasonable to speculate that these creatures could, without difficulty, make their home among the clouds of the Earth's atmosphere. Nonetheless, with no clear answers and definitive proof, the mystery of the sky critter will continue far into the future. Finally, let us know what you think in the comments section below. But for now, thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries from a Forgotten World, and we hope to see you again very soon.